This is Hydra Player Tracking Config Part 2. In Part 2, we're going to talk about users, permissions, and roles. So, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to log in. TOM-ASDF. Okay. We go to the admin panel and we go to the button that says Roles Permissions. Okay, so every casino has different roles, whether it be manager, technician, cage person, cashier, customer service, floor assistant, dealers, various things. So each of those persons is a role. So what we're going to do here is we're going to add a role. And we're going to call this role Boss. Okay. Now we have Boss, added Boss. Now we're going to go back and we're going to edit the permissions for Boss. Okay, right now, Boss is not granted permission to do anything. New players, view accounts, replace cards, etc., etc., etc. But we're going to go ahead and say Boss can do all these things. So we're going to check all these boxes. This is called a module, by the way. This is the basic module. We're going to hit save. Now we're going to go to the admin panel module. And we're going to go ahead and check all these boxes as well. Give permission granted to Boss. We're going to save. We're going to go to Special. We're going to say yes, save. We're going to go to Basic Reports. We're going to go ahead and give Boss access to all these different reports. You'll see the significance of this in a minute. We're going to save. We're going to go to the last module, which is Tables. And we're going to give Boss all those permissions. Save. Okay. There's a button down here called Module Operations. And this is what each button is assigned to which panel. So the basic panel is the panel that you get when you first log in. Okay. So this is the admin panel. This is the basic panel. And we have the table panel, etc. Okay. So now I'm going to go back to the admin panel and I'm going to create a user. This is going to be our boss. His name's going to be Steve Smith. And his user ID is going to be Steve. That's the user ID that you use when you log in. You can add an optional photo, which we're going to do. This is just a photo that you have. You can take a photo of somebody. You can put it in the pictures library. You can put their actual photo in their profile. We're going to save that. Password is going to be ASDF. It's my favorite one. Confirm the password, ASDF. PIN code, that is for the kiosk. So we're going to make that 1234. It has to be a number. User level is 1. Language is going to be English. Role is going to be boss. Whoops. And we're going to create a user. Okay. So if I go through now, if I hit edit users, I look at the last user here. We see Steve Smith. Role is boss. Okay, good. So now we're going to log out completely. And we're going to sign in as Steve. And the password is my favorite, ASDF. And we're going to hit login. Whoop. Capital S. Okay, so now you see Steve has access to all these different buttons. We go to the table panel, he has access to all these buttons. We go to the admin panel, access to all these buttons, etc. Okay, now let's make some changes. Let's sign back out. Let's sign back in as Tom, T-O-M. Password, ASDF. Okay, let's go back to the admin panel. Let's go and let's edit the role. Boss. We're going to edit the permissions. So now, there's going to be some things that Steve's not going to be able to do because he doesn't have the permissions granted. Okay, we're going to save that. Close. We're going to log out. We're going to log back in as Steve again, capital S. Whoops. Okay, now Steve still has permissions granted for a lot of these functions, but these buttons are now grayed out and not available. So that's what happens when you edit the role. For example, maybe a customer service person would have access to adding players, viewing accounts, replacing cards, etc., but does not have access to, let's say, admin functions. Sign out. Go back in. Okay, so let's go back in and change that again. We're gonna change that role of boss, and we're gonna say, okay, you know what? In the admin panel, the only thing the boss can do is unlock users. I'm sorry, unlock players. Players get locked when they enter their PIN into the kiosk wrong a certain number of times. Save. Close. Okay, we're going to go ahead and log back out. I'm going to go back in as Steve. Okay, Steve still has some functionality here in the basic module. In the admin module, Steve only has one function, and that's to be able to unlock users. Again, a locked user is a person that has entered their PIN into the kiosk wrong a certain number of times. We'll get into that later. Okay, So we've created a user, we can edit users, and we can edit roles and permissions or add roles and permissions. We've also seen that there are several of them that are already here and they're set up for various different permissions. This is from a previous customer. Okay, one other thing I want to talk about in this area is when you add a user, which is an employee, let's look at the user that we added, Steve Smith. You also have the capability of printing an ID card for that employee. So I'm going to take a blank white card. I'm going to insert it into the printer, mag stripe up and toward the front. I'm going to print a card. Now what I have is basically an employee ID card. And had I had the right photo, it would even have the correct photo. What you can do is you can punch a hole in the top, you can put a lanyard through it, and you have an actual employee ID card. Now I will say one thing about the printer. This Fargo DTC 1250 has capability of both color and black and white ribbons. The part number 045000 is the color ribbon, and part number 045102 is the black and white ribbon. So I printed out this ID in color, and I printed out this ID in black and white. Again, printing out the IDs is just an option. And that concludes users, roles, and permissions.